Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. As usual, find me on Facebook, YouTube one way, and on BitChute. And by all means, drop me a mail and so on and so forth. If you guys wish to contact me, you can use those avenues. Comment in the comment section. Let me know if you think that I'm on the ball. If you think I'm a total moron, by all means, get in contact with me. Information, emails, and all that kind of stuff should all be up on there. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this was just a thought I had. This is a little apologetic video. Might be, hopefully, be a short video where I've heard it said, because I listen to a lot of debates between atheists and Christians, okay? And one thing I've noticed, a theme that reoccurs and an assertion that reoccurs, and that I've never really seen anyone answer, at least in this way, okay, is the idea that for us Christians to say that we are made in the image of God is a bit arrogant, right? Is a bit arrogant. Now, first, usually there is a dismissal where they say, oh, well, you know, if we were actually horses, then we would make a horse-looking God. Now, this is obviously a stupid assertion. If anyone has ever looked at any of the pagan religions, you know, yeah, you'll know that they look like all kinds of things, okay? All kinds of animals and stuff like that. And it's just, it's completely ridiculous, sort of thing. But in the Bible, anyone that knows, again, anyone that knows anything about the Christian faith, when we talk about the image of God, we're not saying that we actually look like him. Absolutely, you know, it's not, that's not what it's talking about when it says the image, we look like him, because God, being a supernatural being, being outside space and time, doesn't have a physical body the way we do. Obviously, that would be completely absurd. And again, you have to go back and look at the semantic range, right? The semantic range of these words. How can they be applied to describe something? And so when we're talking about in the image of, we're talking about that there's some sort of a commonality, right? We're like God in some way. Now, is it arrogant to say so, that we are like God in some way, right? Because here's the interesting thing. When you have, in the Garden of Eden, you have Adam and Eve, right? And one of the things that Satan says to Eve, or during that deception phase, he says, if you eat the fruit, you will be like God, or like the gods, right? And this is very interesting, because if, you know, it's like he's sort of implying that you're not, in a way. Now, anyone who is a Christian should know that one of the silly things with Eve, about her mistake and all that sort of thing, wasn't just the lack of faith that she went and listened to the serpent, but the fact that Eve did not recognize that in every way that is meaningful, she was already like God. In every way that was meaningful, she was already like God. And how do we make sense of this? Why is it even logical to say that we must have something in common with God, that we must be like him in some way? Well, think of the following. If I say to you the following phrase, Saiu katanu cavaco, right? If you understood that, guaranteed you are Brazilian, right? Or you have spent enough time in Brazil to understand this expression, right? So immediately I know, right? If I say saiu katanu cavaco, if I'm talking about someone, right? I'm talking about a person, and I say to you, ele saiu katanu cavaco, right? You immediately know, right? Hey, this guy must be a Brazilian. If you're in the know, if you're Brazilian, you'll understand exactly what I mean, right? So the fact that we understand this tells us something, that there is a commonality there, because I've understood that this individual has understood. And we look for this commonality just as human beings with each other, right? If a piece of music starts playing, I'm like, oh, and then another person listens, you immediately, there's a commonality, there's this connection, right? Because we've understood, there's something, we share that, there's something we understand. And so similarly, right, the Christian affirmation is what? God created the heavens and the earth. right? And he created them in a law-like manner. He ordered everything, and so on and so forth. Right. Now, it makes sense that the only reason why we can make sense of the universe is because there must obviously be some commonality between the one who created and designed it and us. Because if that commonality wasn't there, we'd be able to make no sense of the universe whatsoever. So that means the fact that we can understand laws of logic, we can understand abstract concepts, we can go and investigate the natural world, that we understand mathematics, that we can understand laws of nature, that we can understand laws, all of these kinds of things means that we must have something in common with the one that put these things into place, which is why not only can we discover them, but once discovered, we can understand them. Right? We must at least have that in common. Right? So the Bible never says that we are gods or that whatever. It says we are like him. We are in the image. So we're not exactly like him, of course, right? Because we're individual. God, we're a separate being, completely, entirely separate. But if someone came to you and says, no, we're not in the image of God, we're nothing like him in any way whatsoever, then your first question should be, well, then why do you understand the universe he created? Right? It would be a peculiar thing for someone. It would actually be a strange thing for someone to say, we've got nothing in common with God at all. Right? And the first thing you would say, well, if you've got nothing in common with God, then why do you understand him at all? Why do you understand the works of his hands at all? Why does any of these things make sense to you at all? How can you profess to understand the universe if you've got nothing in common with him at all? Right? And that's often where human beings clash, when two people, they're not understanding each other, you've got nothing in common, and then there's a clash, and so on and so forth. And then this is what happens with human beings, where God tries to reach out and tries to help us understand him, and so on and so forth. And he's like, there's something here between us. We can, and his statement, right, when he says, we have created man in our image, that's one of the affirming things. It's why Christians invented science, for example, because it's like, he's literally telling us that we are like him. That if God is moral and we discover morality and we have these moral intuitions, it means there must be these common things. The universe is then, if we are discovering these things, this is where we connected. There's something, we have some sort of commonality with God. And it's perfectly logical to accept that, to expect that. It's perfectly logical for God to say that I've created man in my image, right? So he's an analogy of me, he's an extension of me. In a sense, there's a connection there, a basis by which we can understand and communicate, and where he can understand me, who I am, and so forth. And that whole thing of understanding God as an individual, because that's what God is. He's a person. He's an individual. The whole thing is part and parcel of Christianity. That's a lot of the time what we're trying to do, is trying to understand him. Why does he say this? Why does he say that? And so on and so forth. And the fact that we can engage in that kind of work at all, whether theologically, whether philosophically, whether scientifically, is because we obviously have something in common with the individual who instantiated and created everything. And this is how we know that God is nothing like the animals, because the animals have no concept of these things. The rocks have no concept of these things, which, you understand, you sort of get where I'm coming from. There's no correlation there. Even between us and animals, we can deduce and decipher certain things of animals because we are a higher order creature and we have reasoning capacities. And at the end of the day, God created the creatures and stuff like that. But a lot of the time, and you can ask anyone that owns pets and stuff like that, you can live with these creatures all your entire life, and there will always be things that they do that you're like, what the heck are they thinking? What is going through this animal's mind when it does these things? There's no understanding that we can surmise, and often people anthropomorphize the animals and things like that. But essentially speaking, We've got no understanding of animals, even though we can get along with them and have them as companions. And because they're very, very simple, the animals don't demand much, and so on and so forth. But we will never have any understanding of what it's like to be this animal, in the sense that we can have the equivalent kind of empathy and understanding of other human beings and stuff, because we don't share that commonality. So we can have an understanding of God in the way that we cannot have of animals, essentially, which is why we know we're made in the image of God, right? And the monkey is not made in the image of God, right? We're not just talking, and this really exposes the very materialistic way in which the atheist thinks that it has to do with some physical. No, it's not. Which is why you expect the atheist to look at the ape and to look at the human and say, oh, well, one must come from each other. Nonsense, right? Absolute nonsense. I mean, the difference, especially because the differences between humans and chimps, for example, is not one of degrees. It's one of kinds, right? It's a vast chasm of difference, right? If you just look at the chimp and say, well, just because they kind of look like us, that therefore they must be like, it's just so ridiculous. It's just, you are jumping over a chasm of faith. Like, it's just completely ridiculous. The ability to create art and music and language and all the computational and abstract abilities that we have it's universes apart from what the chimp is going through the chimp's mind, and what the chimp can understand and even is. It's a difference in kind. It's not a difference in degrees. But naturally, the atheist would think in those terms, because that's the only way in which they can think. They can only think in those terms. And so, according to their philosophy, in their mind, they think, well, then by Christians saying that we're in the image of God, sort of thing, it's natural that they would then think, oh, well, this is an arrogant, we're trying to make ourselves more than we are, sort of thing. Well, it's not. It's just simply logical. If God created everything, put in laws, etc., whatever the case might be, and if we're able to understand that and discover and learn and decipher and things of that sort, if we're able to have a relationship with God, then obviously we must have something quite significant, a significant amount in common with him. We must be like God in a very, very significant way. And this was one of the great tragedies of Eve, of the fall of Eve. And the reason why I say Eve is because Eve fell to this argument, not Adam. Adam knew what he was doing. Adam was not deceived. Is that, unfortunately, with this rhetoric, Eve is like, oh, I'm going to be... And what Eve didn't realize is that she was already like God in every way that actually mattered. But she desired some, and we get that even till today, right? Even till today, we still get these issues, these kind of, where people come and we want to judge each other and say, I'm better than you, and you're better, and this, and even a person with low self-esteem might sort of put themselves down and all these kinds of things. It's like, no matter who you are already, we're like each other, in all the ways that matter, right? In all the ways that matter. I am like you, I'm like the next person, and so on and so forth. In all the ways that will already matter. And all the rest, though obviously important, right? That kind of, all the differences are important, but in all the ways that matter, we're all exactly alike, right? And we can, and there's bridges there that can be built for these things. So that's just an interesting, just because I had the thought and I found it interesting. I've been thinking about this for a while, and I thought I'd share it. I thought it was a profound, it just came to me. Well, of course, obviously this makes sense for God to say, I've created man in my image. I mean, the fact that we can understand God at all, that he can speak to us and give us revelation and stuff. Now, for the sake of argument, whether you believe in revelation or not, or whether revelation is true or not, is irrelevant, right? If true, it makes sense that he'd have to be like us in some way, or us like him, right? Rather, us like him in significant ways, in very, very significant ways, or at least in all the ways that matter, which permit us to not only understand him but to have a relationship with him. You know, because you cannot, and this is, and just as an observation on modern society, where you see how people, it's Satan's will to destroy humanity, to degrade humanity. And you can see that in the sense that human beings no longer even understand each other, right? And we are, you know, myself as a man, I can have a relationship with a woman that I can't find in another man or in an animal or whatever the case might be. There's something, you know, there's something special there. There's something unique there. Or whether with a woman in terms of a marriage, or whether another man in terms of a friendship, there's things there that I cannot find in any other species or any other creature in the universe, right? Except for God. And this is why, if you look at my video where I talk about Bible contradictions, one of the very earlier ones where they say, why does it look like there are two different stories of the creation account? And the second one is where God created the animal, sort of in the Garden of Eden. God creates the animal and brings it to Adam, because remember, God has created Adam, and now he's looking, he says, it's not good for man to be alone. Not good for man to be alone. He needs another one like him, in his image, right? In his image, like him, to have a relationship. And this process that God goes through, where he brings the animals and Adam names them and all that kind of stuff, but in all the creatures of the world, there was no companion to be found for Adam, right? And it's stressing that thing. It's stressing that we are not like these creatures at all. There's no basis for common understanding and stuff like that. Yes, they're great to have as pets. They're entertaining. They're beautiful, majestic, and all these kinds of things. But there's not that. You cannot have with an animal what you can have with another human being, because we're not this. We're not. There's nothing in common. We're not the same, right? We are completely, totally different things. Right, and so that plays into all of that, into the whole doctrine of Christianity and how we understand all of these things and stuff like that. So only with making Eve like Adam could there be some kind of relationship and stuff like that. So between men and women and men, and that's how we know you are like me. I can have and even now, sort of when we sometimes get along with some people and we don't get along with other people. When you get along with people, why? It's because there's a commonality there. There's some underlying thing that we can get along here because we understand here, sort of thing. And ultimately, in the whole Christian intention, at least, or the ideal would be for everyone in the world, even though we still want to be unique and different and all that kind of stuff, but have enough of a foundational basis in common that we can all be like a big family and all these kinds of things. I know that sounds soppy and wishy-washy, but we want that. And the reason why we misunderstand each other and all this kind of stuff, it's not because we have different worldviews, and that the worldview itself is inherently different, but it's because they're different. Our foundations are different, which is why we don't get along. It's not because the foundation in its own right is necessarily evil, because that can be discussed, the worldview. But the fact that there are different foundations, which mean we don't have anything in common. And that's it. And that's why you get these days with the social justice movement and stuff like that, where because they have rebelling against the fact that people don't get along, and there's fighting and there's strife and things like that in the world, that they're trying to remove. They have mistakenly, they've correctly identified the fact that one of the reasons people don't get along is because of the underlying deep-rooted differences. But then they've gone the wrong way by saying, if we remove all differences completely and sort of put everyone on an equal footing, so that we all like carbon copies of each other, then we will, and it's a false dichotomy. We can be individual, but it's the philosophical worldview foundation that is really where it lies, sort of thing, and not whether you like rock and you like rap. That's not it. That's irrelevant. Or I'm an engineer and you're a street sweeper, sort of thing. There's no reason why those things need to be a barrier. It's because we're stupid, so we make them, because I like to be better than you and you like to be better than me, sort of thing. But ultimately, it's the worldview that comes from underneath, the presuppositions, what lies right at the foundations of things. And why God, he's like, you guys are like me, we can understand, and he's trying to impart to us the worldview that can connect everyone, not only to each other, but back to himself, right? And we can reconcile the world back to himself. We wants to reconnect, and that's a powerful message. It ties in, so yeah, and it plays into the whole thing where it's like, Jesus came to die for mankind, for the sins of mankind, not for the animals and all these kinds of things, because they're a different order of things, right? They're not like us, so that's that, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that was interesting. It was just a thought I had, and I thought I'd share. So I hope it helps you, and if you agree, cool. If you disagree, let me know. Well, try articulate as best as you can. Don't just say, oh, you're a moron. I may be, but be nice as much as you can, sort of thing. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. God bless. Take it easy.